Consider supporting Archaeosoup on Patreon for as little as $1 per month. Link available in the video description. Thank you.
Questions of Doom.
Hello and welcome back to another Questions of Doom. In this series, as ever, I attempt to answer questions that you send my way using the archaeosoup@gmail.com email address, as displayed on the YouTube channel homepage, but as you'll also find at the end of this video. In answering these questions by video, it is my fond hope that the answer is not only useful to the person who's asked the question, or in today's case, presented the comment, but also to other people who are wondering the same or similar things. And, as I just hinted, today's question has come in the form of a comment on the Archaeosoup Facebook page. It's a comment by Jennifer, and it goes as follows. How much do you follow modern archaeology and history up to present day? How much do you follow science and pseudoscience? I follow, that is to say, Jennifer follows, Credible Hulk and Miles Power for some science and pseudoscience information. I find it important to notice if something is questionable on any side of ideas to facts given. Even historians vary at times in views, and what some would call evidence, like those having Holocaust denial or saying 9/11 is a hoax. I may be a bit vague there, she says. Though my point is, even conspiracies and snake oil have archaeology to such on history. I still find it fascinating and sometimes irritating, but fascinating. Now, we had a brief conversation essentially where I said interesting comment, and I'll get back to you in the form of a Questions of Doom video, because I figure this is worthwhile responding to in a video so that more people can get involved with the conversation. And also, actually, I think it will help to expand a little bit on some of the thoughts and the ideas that come to mind having read your comment. So thank you very much for the comment, and in that sense the question, Jennifer. And I suppose first of all I would say I don't really follow pseudoscience too closely. I keep aware of broad swathes of ideas, but it frankly can be a little bit depressing to really go down the Gaia wormhole, or to look at every Göbekli Tepe video that's out there, or frankly even to notice too much with regards to the sheer popularity of videos covering topics such as ancient aliens, secrets and mysteries, you know, the top 10 things that they don't want you to know, this kind of thing that you see in videos, pyramid code, etc., as documentaries on Netflix and all this sort of stuff. So we have YouTube, social media, Netflix, bespoke websites like Gaia.com, and not only do I not want to soak myself in that stuff, because I would find it a little bit depressing in so much as how popular they are, but also I've got better things to do with my time. And the reason for that is that there's an awful lot of really good and solid science being done all the time in the world of archaeology. And while it helps to be aware of what pseudoscientists are currently thinking, if nothing else so that you're not surprised when someone brings it up in conversation, it doesn't warrant too much of my attention, or too much of any serious archaeologist's attention. Incidentally, the first part of your question, how much do I follow modern archaeology and history up to present day? Well, the answer is as much as possible. So in that sense, that's a slightly separate question, this idea of what is archaeology and when's the sort of the cut-off point. I'm one of those people who argue that actually the archaeology of my bedroom this morning when I got up is an archaeological site. I'm a bit Tracy Emin-ish in that sense. There's something of value there, archaeologically speaking, even though that's a very temporary record of my morning. So that hopefully that answers that. The one thing that I don't do and would never do is use the stated research agendas, methodologies, and outcomes of pseudoscience as a measure, check, or balance against the validity of research agendas, outcomes, and methodologies of actual archaeology or scientific method. And this is because the two are incomparable and incompatible, really. Even if your goal is, as you say in your comment, to notice if something is questionable on any side of the ideas to facts given, these two won't help you achieve that, because the fundamental function of actual scientific method and pseudoscientific ideas is utterly different. It's a difference between a hypothesis and a premise, I suppose. And to be more specific, I'll give you an example. So in scientific method, hypotheses are tested. So for example, I might say the sun will rise in the morning, and an experiment is conducted. Observations are made, repeated observations, and reliable testable outcomes, repeated outcomes are required in order to come to any conclusions as to whether or not the sun will rise in the morning. And eventually we'll agree, scientific colleagues and I peer-reviewed my work, and we came to the conclusion that, okay, we can for now have an emergent understanding, an emergent truth that the sun will rise every morning. And then we move on. We move on to the next question. What's the next way? What about the moon? The moon, does the moon change every night, or is that the next horizon is what's interesting to scientists, an actual scientific method, because it's designed to help you figure out what is likely to be true so that you can move on to the next idea. All the while keeping one eye on some of these ideas and these theories, for example, that the sun rises every day, because the moment that the sun is shown not to rise every day, then the science is bad and it has to be re-examined or completely thrown out, and new ideas have to be constructed. It is not about proving my idea, my premise, that the sun rises. It's about testing my statements, my hypothesis, that I believe, I suggest that the sun rises every day. Whereas in pseudoscientific methodologies, it is about proving a premise. For example, a premise might be that there's always a cream truck around the corner, and all we need to do is just go around the corner and look hard enough and we'll find that ice cream truck. And when we get there, we find not so much an ice cream truck, but a van which is abandoned. But it's okay, because underneath the van there's a fragment of what could be a waffle from an ice cream. And even though this van isn't an ice cream truck, it's highly suggestive that this waffle came from an ice cream truck that was here. And we just need to keep on looking for that, and we will eventually find it. It never ends. It doesn't result in a testable hypothesis, and it's certainly not a repeatable experiment if you just keep on meandering through looking for that premise, that preformed idea. And I suspect that's partly by design. It's self-sustaining in a way that scientific method isn't. So scientific method is self-sustaining by constantly churning, retesting, and looking for new things to test. Pseudoscientific method is sustained by never quite answering the question, but always giving you the sense that somehow we have gone on an adventure together, and we together know more than those other people do. It's attractive, it's charismatic. Very often, as I say, there are YouTube channels that have millions of followers, far more than I can ever hope to achieve, because of this charisma, and because actually also fundamentally it never has to account for itself. It never has to upset anyone by being right or wrong. It can, in that sense, also accommodate a great number of people. So actual scientific method and pseudoscientific investigations are fundamentally, basically, functionally distinct and different. They are incompatible. They are like oil and water. And I would never really seek to compare the two and get any meaningful data, anything useful to come from that comparison. However, where there's an awful lot of crossover, actually, is in the people, the communities who are drawn to science and pseudoscience with genuine, open, honest, inquiring, curious minds that are fueling and providing hundreds of questions that they want to have answered. And I suspect that you, Jennifer, based on your comments, fall into this category, a genuinely curious person who also doesn't want to feel as though they're missing out on a key piece of information. And I don't blame anyone, even for a microsecond, who feels that, or even experiences that pseudoscientific communities, authors, and for example social media are welcoming, accessible, and easy to plug into. And I suspect that's because they don't have the same accountability as a scientific community does. There's no peer review, there's no harsh criticism. If someone has a different flavour of a notion in pseudoscientific circles, then broadly speaking they are accommodated. It's a broad church, and that's a good thing in many respects. It's very welcoming to have that level of conversation and feel as though nothing is off the table, whereas I suppose it can look therefore as though the scientific community is taking things off the table all the time. But that's because of scientific method. If an idea has merit, can be tested and can be shown to have merit, then it will get attention. But as soon as an idea is shown to be a bad idea, it is coldly discarded. It's also as well fair to say that the academic community has a rate of publication, conversation and change even that is comparably quite slow. This is partly because of all the ways in which, for example, things are published. So I wrote something back at the beginning of the year that I won't see published until next month. And in that time I've seen dozens of small books turning up in the works, a local bookshop, or on Netflix, or on YouTube, or blog posts that are propagating pseudoscientific ideas. So there's a rate of change and a fleetness of foot that pseudoscientific communities have that can make them seem as though they're covering much more ground, much more quickly and effectively. And also as well, there's an administration thing behind those scientific departments. The discussion is the slowly ticking and churning wheels that absolutely resist change, which are the administrations of universities, for example, or even actually smaller units and institutions, where even if you want to have a fast, fluid conversation, protocol can get in the way. And this is actually something that I had a conversation with a colleague about this, and he said it was irritating but fascinating to think about this. And he went on to say, where science and academia can be criticised is that we are slow on our feet, partly due to rigour and things like publishing pressure as well. It's hard to have a conversation when someone's on your back saying you need to write your next paper. Intellectual property rights come into it, which is actually similar to one of the problems that I have with pseudoscientific authors. This idea of having a marketable, sellable idea, that's my idea, that can sometimes get in the way of academia. These can stifle public access to scientific method and the conversations that archaeologists are actually having, as opposed to the conversations that they're characterized as having by pseudoscience, describing them as mainstream archaeologists with closed minds, this kind of thing. I suppose a really interesting and slightly dangerous development along these lines, in terms of the speed of an idea, that I've seen in recent months in the UK, has been linked with historic monuments, prehistoric monuments, and national identity, essentially a form of white supremacy, and a fundamental misunderstanding as to the nature of some of these monuments. So there's a monument called Wayland's Smithy that is a burial monument from the Neolithic, a time long before the time of the story of Wayland, which is a Germanic story. But because of the name, it's clear that some groups have been gathering in some of these places and filming themselves performing weird rites and extolling a form of interpretation of history and how history is incumbent upon us to act on, for the preservation of whatever the white species, or I'm not quite sure what the terminology is, but there's something quick moving and fast there that actually my archaeological colleagues and myself even have been quite slow to respond to, and we're only really starting to get moving on that now, months later. The person I was talking to said that reaching out to groups like Hope Not Hate, working more publicly with people who are curious, is probably a good idea. Trying to bring people like, for example, white supremacists in on good archaeology and tie that in with broader conversations about identity and even race, for example, is crucial. And I suppose that's probably the thread that I would bring all of this to a close on, is that we need to meet those curious people like you, people who watch these videos, and also videos on far more popular YouTube channels who talk about ancient aliens. We need to meet those people with honesty, integrity, and accessibility, and that's one of the things I try to do here at Archaeosoup, on the YouTube channel, on the Facebook page, and in other ways whenever I can. Specifically, the conclusion is that we need to deprive pseudoscience of the space to thrive, where it constantly feeds but never quite satisfies people's curiosity, and therefore keeping people dependent on pseudoscientific ideas. We need to fully feed people, feed them till they're bursting with good information and ideas and facts, and maybe reassess in particular how we publish our ideas, so that people can have access to them. And finally, I just had a note here that I wanted to say, and that is that the best teachers that I have ever had wanted me to develop independence. They guided me, they moulded in some ways some aspects of my thinking and my thoughts, but they also expected me to add to it, and eventually they wanted me to grow beyond them, to not need them anymore. My dissertation supervisor is a wonderful man, but I haven't consulted with him on what to think about something for years. I've talked with him, we've conversed and debated things, but I've never said, what should I think about this? And that's something you need to be really aware of, is how and at what point you are given freedom to add to previously stated emergent truth. That's the mechanism that separates science from pseudoscience. Because I think as soon as you go too far away from that broad church idea, if you start to say that there weren't giants at one point who walked the earth, and that archaeologists aren't actually hiding those bodies, you will be ejected from that community. In the scientific community, if you came up with a weird idea, you're likely to be unpopular if you won't listen to reason. But at the very least, there is a mechanism to have that idea tested. And if you can test it and show your results and you're working, you may well change the fundamentals of the science that you're working in. It's possible to change science from within by having a good idea and demonstrating it. It's not really possible to change the fundamentals of pseudoscience from within. But anyway, I'm going around in circles now, talking about accountability, public conversations, publishing, so on and so forth. So I think you get what I'm talking about here, and hopefully this has been a useful, worthwhile response to your comment. I do very much appreciate your comment and all the comments that I get. But this one in particular, I figured warranted a video response, so that I could explore some of these ideas and also encourage conversation in the comments below. So please do continue below. Thank you once again, Jennifer, for your comments, for your question of doom. And as ever, guys, until next time, do take care. Bye-bye.